The smallest acts of love are often the ones money can never buy. The applause inside the downtown Chicago charity ballroom had barely faded when Nathan Brooks stepped through the revolving doors into the cool evening air. Behind him, photographers continued capturing smiling donors while luxury cars lined the curb beneath glowing city lights. Nathan had spent the evening shaking hands, signing pledge cards, and promising generous donations to organizations that help children across Illinois. Everyone praised his kindness. Yet as he adjusted the cuff of his tailored charcoal suit and headed toward the waiting black sedan, an unexpected feeling of emptiness settled quietly inside him. For years, success had followed him everywhere, but genuine connection always seemed to remain one step beyond his reach. His driver had already opened the rear door when a small voice called out from somewhere behind him. "Excuse me, mister." Nathan turned and saw a little girl standing several feet away near the edge of the sidewalk. She could not have been older than 8. Her blonde hair rested neatly beneath a light blue ribbon, and she wore a simple blue cardigan over a white dress that looked carefully pressed despite showing signs of everyday wear. She held something tightly in both hands, as though she had spent the entire evening gathering enough courage to carry it across the parking lot. Nathan smiled politely and stepped away from the car. "Hello there." The little girl walked toward him slowly, never taking her blue eyes away from his face. When she finally reached him, she carefully unfolded a worn $10 bill that had been folded so many times its edges had become soft. Without saying another word, she gently placed it into Nathan's hand. He looked down in surprise before lifting his eyes back to hers. "Sweetheart, I think you may have the wrong person." She quietly shook her head. "No, sir. I have been waiting for you." Nathan glanced toward the community center entrance where volunteers continued helping guests leave the event, wondering whether a parent or guardian might be nearby. Seeing no one immediately approaching, he knelt slightly so they could speak comfortably at eye level. "Can you tell me your name?" She nodded. "Emma Collins." Nathan smiled warmly. "Well, Emma, this belongs to you." He carefully held the $10 bill toward her. Instead of accepting it, she gently closed his fingers around the money with both of her small hands. "Please keep it." Nathan frowned with gentle confusion. "Why would I do that?" Emma took a slow breath, looking down at the sidewalk before finding the courage to meet his eyes again. "Because it is everything I have." The sounds of the city seemed to disappear around them. Nathan no longer noticed the traffic, the conversations behind him, or even his driver waiting patiently beside the car. He looked again at the worn bill resting in his palm. It was not simply money. It had been protected carefully, folded repeatedly, and carried long enough to become almost fragile. "Emma," he asked softly, "what do you want me to buy with this?" She shook her head once more. A tiny hopeful smile appeared across her face even as her eyes filled with tears she tried very hard not to let fall. "Nothing." She paused just long enough for her next words to settle deep inside Nathan's heart. "I was wondering if you could be my dad until the sun goes down." Nathan remained completely still. Of all the requests he had expected after leaving a charity event, nothing had prepared him for those simple words. He looked at the $10 bill resting in his hand, then back at the little girl standing alone beneath the evening lights. And for the first time in many years, he realized there were moments in life when the greatest question was not how much something cost, but whether someone was willing to stay long enough to make a lonely child believe she mattered. Nathan looked at the little $10 bill once more before carefully placing it back into Emma's hand. He closed her small fingers around it with the same gentleness she had shown only moments earlier. "You should keep this," he said softly. "It belongs to you." Emma looked down at the folded bill, then quietly shook her head. "I saved it for almost a year." Nathan smiled kindly, hoping to ease the seriousness of the moment. "That is a long time to save $10. She nodded. "I helped clean tables after community dinners. Sometimes I picked up litter in the park when people gave me $1 or $2. My birthday money went into the same envelope. I did not buy ice cream. I did not buy toys. I wanted to make sure I had enough." Nathan felt his heart grow unexpectedly heavy. Enough for what? Emma looked toward the bright lights still shining through the charity center windows where families laughed together before answering. To ask someone important. Nathan followed her gaze. Parents were helping children into coats. Fathers carried sleepy sons on their shoulders. Mothers held tiny hands while crossing the sidewalk. It was an ordinary evening for everyone else, Yet Emma watched those moments as though they belonged to another world. "Why me?" Nathan asked quietly. Emma reached into her small backpack and carefully removed a folded newspaper clipping. It showed Nathan smiling during another charity event months earlier while speaking with several children. The article praised his generosity and described him as someone who believed every child deserved to feel seen. She handed him the clipping with obvious care. "I kept this because you looked like you listened when children talked." Nathan stared at the photograph of himself for several seconds. He barely remembered the event, but Emma had remembered every detail. "So you waited for tonight?" he asked. She nodded. "Miss Evelyn from the community center said you might come back this year." Nathan looked around until he noticed an older volunteer standing near the entrance. The woman smiled gently and walked toward them. "I was wondering when she would finally find the courage," Miss Evelyn said warmly. Nathan introduced himself before asking, "You know Emma?" "Very well," she replied. "She comes here every week after school. She helps organize books, folds tablecloths after community dinners, and never complains about anything." Emma looked down shyly. Miss Evelyn continued with a quiet smile. "She has carried that $10 bill everywhere for months. She believed that someday she would meet someone willing to spend one afternoon, being the father she has always imagined." Nathan looked at Emma with new understanding. "What would we even do together?" he asked gently. Emma smiled for the first time since approaching him. She reached into her backpack again and removed a small spiral notebook decorated with colorful stars. Across the front cover, written in careful pencil, were 4 simple words. "Perfect Dad Day." Nathan slowly opened the notebook. The first page held a handwritten list in large, careful letters. "Eat ice cream together. Feed ducks at the park. Read a story on a bench. Take one family picture. Watch the sunset before going home." None of the wishes involved expensive gifts or exciting adventures. Every item could fit into an ordinary afternoon. Nathan quietly turned another page and found blank spaces waiting to be filled, as though Emma had believed for months that someone would eventually help her complete the list. He looked back at the little girl standing patiently before him, still holding the folded $10 bill she had worked nearly a year to save. Then he closed the notebook gently and smiled. "Emma," he said softly, "I cannot take your money." She looked disappointed for only a second before he continued. "But if you will let me, I would be honored to help you begin your perfect dad day." Emma's eyes grew wide with hopeful surprise, and she hugged the notebook tightly against her chest while whispering the words she had almost stopped believing she would ever say. "Does that mean you are staying?" Emma's smile grew so naturally that Nathan realized it might have been many months since someone had answered one of her hopes with a simple yes. The city lights shimmered around them as the evening slowly settled over downtown Chicago, but neither of them seemed eager to leave the sidewalk. Nathan looked at the little notebook again before asking, "Where should the perfect dad day begin?" Emma carefully turned to the first page and pointed to the top line with one small finger. "Ice cream first," she said with complete confidence. "Dad days should always start with ice cream because that is what my teacher says happy memories taste like." Nathan laughed softly. "Then we should not keep your teacher waiting." A few minutes later, they walked together to a neighborhood ice cream shop just a few blocks away. Nathan noticed that Emma did not ask for the largest sundae or the most colorful dessert. She studied the menu carefully before choosing a simple vanilla cone with rainbow sprinkles. Nathan ordered the same. They sat beside the front window watching people pass along the sidewalk while Emma opened the little notebook once again. She carefully placed a tiny check mark beside the first wish before smiling proudly. "One down," she whispered. Nathan looked at the notebook with growing curiosity. "Did you really make this all by yourself?" Emma nodded. "Every time I saw another family doing something together, I wrote it down if it looked happy." Nathan remained quiet for a moment. Those words carried far more weight than any speech he had given at the charity event earlier that evening. Emma slowly turned another page. Tucked inside the notebook was a folded sheet of paper covered with careful pencil drawings. Nathan unfolded it and discovered a simple timeline labeled Perfect Dad Day. Every hour had been planned with remarkable care. Feed ducks. Read a story on a park bench. Share one pretzel. Take a family picture. Watch the sunset. Wave goodbye with a smile. Nothing on the page cost much money. Everything required only time. "You planned all of this?" Nathan asked gently. Emma nodded again. "I wanted to make sure nobody got tired deciding." Nathan smiled warmly. "That is very thoughtful." Emma looked down at her cone before asking a question so quietly that he almost missed it. Do dads ever get bored? Nathan thought carefully before answering. The good ones probably enjoy seeing the world through someone else's eyes. Emma smiled and carefully wrote another sentence beneath the checked ice cream line. Nathan noticed her handwriting was small, but very neat. He leaned slightly closer and read the words. Today someone said yes. Without thinking, Nathan reached for a napkin and quietly folded it into the shape of a tiny heart before placing it beside her notebook. Emma looked at it with delighted surprise. Can I keep it? She asked. Of course, Nathan replied. She carefully slipped the folded napkin heart between the notebook pages as though it belonged there all along. After finishing their ice cream, they walked slowly toward a nearby city park where ducks drifted peacefully across a quiet pond beneath the fading orange sky. Emma reached into her backpack and removed a small paper bag filled with birdseed instead of bread. Miss Evelyn says this is healthier for them, she explained proudly. Nathan smiled again, realizing how many thoughtful people had quietly helped shape the little girl standing beside him. Together they scattered handfuls of birdseed while watching the ducks glide across the water. Emma laughed every time one hurried closer than the others, and for a little while the sadness that had first brought her to the charity event disappeared completely. As they stood beside the pond, Nathan noticed the notebook resting safely inside her backpack beside the carefully folded $10 bill she had refused to spend. Somehow both treasures now seemed connected, and deep inside he began to wonder whether the notebook contained more than a list of simple wishes, because something told him the next page might reveal the reason Emma had believed one perfect day could change an entire life. The late afternoon sun painted long golden shadows across the city park as Emma opened her little notebook once again and carefully placed another check mark beside the words, "Feed ducks together." She smiled with quiet satisfaction before looking up at Nathan. "We are doing better than I hoped," she said. Nathan laughed softly. "What happens next on the schedule?" Emma turned another page decorated with tiny hand-drawn stars and pointed toward a simple sentence written in careful pencil. "Read a story on a park bench. There is a little free library over there," she explained, pointing toward a colorful wooden book cabinet near a walking trail. Together they crossed the grass, and Emma carefully searched through the small collection before choosing an illustrated children's book about a family of bears taking their first camping trip. She carried it proudly back to a wooden bench, overlooking the pond, and handed it to Nathan. "Would you read it?" she asked. Nathan smiled as he opened the first page. It had been years since he had read a children's story aloud. Yet as he began, something unexpected happened. Emma listened with complete attention, smiling at every funny picture and quietly finishing the lines she already knew by heart. Families walked past them, children laughed nearby, birds settled into the trees, and for nearly half an hour the busy world seemed to disappear. When Nathan reached the final page, Emma gently closed the book and hugged it against her chest. "That sounded even better than I imagined," she whispered. Nathan looked at her with genuine curiosity. "Have you read this one before?" Emma nodded. "Miss Evelyn reads it every spring, but it feels different when someone reads it just to you." Those words stayed with Nathan as they continued their walk through the park. A few minutes later, they reached a small pretzel stand where the warm smell of fresh bread drifted through the evening air. Emma immediately smiled and opened her notebook again. "The next wish," she announced happily, "is sharing one pretzel." Nathan bought a warm, soft pretzel, and instead of asking for one of her own, Emma carefully broke it exactly down the middle before handing him the larger piece. "You should have this part," she said. Nathan looked at the uneven pieces and quietly exchanged them. "I think today we both deserve the bigger half." Emma laughed brightly, and the sound seemed to erase years of quiet loneliness from her small voice. As they sat together beneath a large oak tree finishing the pretzel, Nathan noticed Emma carefully watching families passing by. A father helped his daughter learn to ride a bicycle, while another family spread a picnic blanket across the grass. Emma smiled as she watched them, but there was no jealousy in her expression, only quiet appreciation. "Do you know something?" she asked suddenly. Nathan shook his head. "When I was making my notebook, I thought all these things had to be perfect." She slowly opened it to another blank page. "But today nothing has been perfect." Nathan looked surprised. "Really?" Emma giggled. "The ice cream melted on my hand. The ducks ignored us for almost 5 minutes. You gave funny voices to the Bear family. Nathan laughed. I suppose I did. Emma nodded happily. But it still feels perfect. She carefully wrote another sentence beneath the checked list. Perfect is when someone stays. Nathan quietly looked toward the notebook before noticing something tucked inside the back cover. It was a small empty photo sleeve with the words family picture written beneath it in blue crayon. He gently touched the edge without removing it. Emma noticed where he was looking and smiled shyly. There is only one wish left before sunset, she whispered. Nathan looked from the empty photo sleeve back to Emma, suddenly realizing that whatever happened next would become the memory she would carry long after this extraordinary afternoon came to an end. Nathan looked at the empty photo sleeve for several quiet seconds before smiling gently at Emma. It looks like we still have one important mission left. Emma carefully closed the notebook and nodded. The family picture. The words were simple, yet they carried more weight than anything either of them had said that afternoon. They left the park together and followed a tree-lined sidewalk toward the small downtown square where people gathered beneath glowing cafe lights and musicians played gentle acoustic songs. The golden evening sunlight softened every building, making the entire city seem warmer than it had only a few hours earlier. As they walked, Nathan noticed Emma greeting strangers with polite smiles. Several shop owners waved back as though they already knew her. She was clearly not invisible to her neighborhood, yet somehow she had still been carrying an incredible loneliness all by herself. They reached a small photo booth standing beside an old-fashioned candy store. Emma stopped walking immediately. This is the place, she whispered. Nathan looked toward the bright red booth and smiled. Have you been here before? Emma nodded. Many times. She hesitated before continuing. I always watch families come out laughing with their picture strips. Nathan opened the booth curtain. Then, today it is finally your turn. Emma stepped inside beside him, carefully smoothing the front of her blue cardigan while placing the little notebook safely inside her backpack. The machine counted down with flashing numbers. 3, 2, 1. Instead of looking stiffly toward the camera, Emma turned naturally toward Nathan just before the flash. Her smile was genuine, relaxed, and completely free of the sadness she had carried earlier that day. The camera clicked 4 times, capturing moments that neither of them could ever recreate. A few seconds later, the printed photo strip slowly appeared from the machine. Emma held it with both hands as though it were made of glass. She stared silently at the 4 little pictures. In every frame, they were smiling together. Nathan noticed tears quietly gathering in her eyes. Are you all right? He asked softly. Emma nodded without looking away from the photographs. I have never had a picture like this before. Nathan felt a quiet ache inside his heart that no business success had ever prepared him to understand. Emma carefully removed the notebook once again and slipped the fresh photo strip into the empty sleeve waiting beneath the handwritten words family picture. It fit perfectly, almost as though she had measured it months earlier. Then she picked up her pencil and slowly wrote beneath it. We smiled together. Nathan watched every letter appear across the page. Before either of them spoke again, Miss Evelyn approached from the community center carrying a light sweater over one arm. She smiled warmly when she noticed the photo strip resting inside the notebook. I had a feeling you two might still be together, she said kindly. Emma ran over to hug her before proudly showing the completed page. Miss Evelyn's eyes filled with quiet happiness. It is beautiful, she whispered. Nathan thanked her for looking after Emma, but Miss Evelyn gently shook her head. She has always taken care of herself better than any child should have to. After a thoughtful pause, she continued softly. There is something I think you deserve to know before today ends. Nathan listened carefully as the evening breeze stirred the pages of Emma's notebook, and something in Miss Evelyn's voice told him that the story behind the little $10 bill had only just begun. Miss Evelyn waited until Emma wandered a few steps away to admire the glowing fountain in the middle of the square before speaking. The evening sky had turned shades of soft orange and deep blue, and the first stars were beginning to appear above the Chicago skyline. Nathan quietly stood beside her, sensing that the next few minutes would explain far more than the little girl had ever been willing to say herself. Miss Evelyn smiled gently as she watched Emma tracing circles with the toe of her shoe across the brick walkway. She was not always this quiet, she said. There was a time when she could make an entire room laugh. Nathan remained silent, allowing her to continue. Emma lost her mother when she was very young. Her father worked hard to give her a happy childhood, and every Saturday they created what they called a perfect dad day. They never had much money, but they believed memories were worth more than expensive things. Nathan immediately thought about the notebook. Suddenly, every handwritten wish made perfect sense. Miss Evelyn continued softly. Almost a year ago, her father became seriously ill. He is receiving long-term medical treatment several hours from here. He loves Emma more than anything, but right now he cannot be with her the way he wishes. Nathan looked toward Emma again. She was still smiling at the fountain, completely unaware that her story was being shared. "Who takes care of her now?" he asked. "She lives with her aunt," Miss Evelyn replied. "Her aunt works 2 jobs to keep everything together. They love each other very much, but time has become a luxury neither of them can afford." Nathan slowly nodded. Every puzzle piece was quietly finding its place. "And the $10? Miss Evelyn smiled sadly. That was never really about money. Emma believed that if she asked someone to spend time with her, she should offer everything she had. She never wanted anyone to think she expected something for nothing. Nathan lowered his eyes to the sidewalk, remembering how carefully she had folded the worn bill into his hand. It had never been payment. It had been trust. Miss Evelyn reached into her handbag and removed a small white envelope with Emma's name written neatly across the front. "Her father mailed this several months ago," she explained. "He asked me to give it to Emma on the day she finally completed another perfect dad day." Nathan looked at the sealed envelope with quiet surprise. "She has not opened it yet?" Miss Evelyn shook her head. "Because today is the first time another perfect dad day has happened since he became sick." Nathan gently accepted the envelope before walking toward the fountain, where Emma continued watching the dancing water sparkle beneath the lights. "Someone left this for you," he said softly. Emma's eyes widened as she recognized her father's handwriting immediately. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and unfolded a single sheet of paper. She read silently at first, then smiled through grateful tears. After a moment, she looked up at Nathan. He wrote that if I ever finished another perfect dad day, it meant someone kind had walked into my life when I needed them most. Nathan felt his throat tighten as Emma carefully folded the letter and placed it inside the back pocket of her notebook beside the family photograph and the little folded napkin heart. 3 simple keepsakes now rested together, quietly turning an ordinary notebook into something far more precious. Emma closed the cover gently and looked toward the fading sunset. "I thought today was going to be the end," she whispered with a hopeful smile. "But I think it might only be the beginning." The last rays of sunlight slipped behind the buildings as Emma carefully held her notebook against her heart, almost afraid that if she loosened her grip, the beautiful afternoon might quietly disappear like a dream. Nathan looked toward the fading sky before checking the time on his watch. According to the promise she had first whispered outside the charity event, their day together was almost over. He expected to see sadness return to her face, yet instead she surprised him with a peaceful smile. "My dad always said that the best days should end while you are still." Smiling, she said softly. Nathan nodded, but something inside him refused to believe this story was meant to end with a simple goodbye. They walked slowly toward the community center where Miss Evelyn was waiting beside the entrance. The evening breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers from a nearby garden, and the lights inside the building glowed warmly through the windows. Before reaching the front steps, Emma suddenly stopped. She opened her notebook one more time and turned past the completed checklist, the family photograph, the folded napkin heart, and her father's letter until she reached several completely blank pages near the back. Nathan looked at her curiously. "I thought we finished everything." Emma smiled gently. "These pages were never for wishes." She handed him a pencil from her backpack. "They are for memories after the wishes come true." Nathan looked at the empty page before writing carefully across the top. "First perfect dad day together." Emma watched every letter appear before adding today's date beneath it in her own neat handwriting. Together they described the melting ice cream, the ducks that finally came close, the funny bear voices during the story, the shared pretzel beneath the oak tree, the photographs inside the little booth, and the letter from her father. When they finished, the once empty page had become the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Miss Evelyn quietly approached with a warm smile. "That notebook looks different already," she observed. Emma nodded proudly. "It is becoming an album instead of a list." Nathan looked at the pages once more. Every wish they had completed had become a memory, and every memory seemed stronger because it had been shared. Miss Evelyn folded her hands together before speaking gently. Emma's aunt will be here in a few minutes. Nathan felt an unexpected heaviness settle inside him. Only a few hours earlier, Emma had been a stranger. Now the thought of simply walking away felt strangely impossible. Emma seemed to notice the silence between them. She reached into the front pocket of her backpack and carefully removed the folded $10 bill again. Nathan smiled. Immediately. I already told you that belongs to you. Emma nodded. I know. She unfolded the bill one last time before placing it inside the notebook between the first completed checklist and the new memory page. Then it stays here, she said. So I will always remember that I tried to buy time, but someone gave it to me for free. Nathan could not find words strong enough to answer her. At that moment, a modest family sedan pulled quietly into the parking lot. A woman stepped out wearing a grocery store uniform, her expression tired from a long day of work, yet immediately brightening when she saw Emma. The little girl ran to embrace her aunt before proudly holding up the notebook. Her aunt listened as Emma excitedly described every moment of the afternoon, occasionally looking toward Nathan with grateful eyes. When Emma finally returned, she hugged the notebook tightly and smiled. Thank you for making today real, she whispered. Nathan gently placed a hand over his heart. Thank you for reminding me what matters. Emma turned toward her aunt, then looked back one final time. Do you think memories can have another chapter? Nathan watched the little notebook resting safely beneath her arm, and for reasons he could not fully explain, he found himself hoping that the blank pages waiting inside would not stay empty for very long. The following Saturday arrived with clear blue skies and a gentle autumn breeze, but Nathan found himself thinking about Emma long before the morning began. For years his weekends had been filled with business dinners, board meetings, and quiet hours inside an empty penthouse overlooking the city. Now he found himself driving toward the community center carrying a small paper bag from the same bakery his own father had once visited when Nathan was a little boy. Inside were 2 warm cinnamon rolls, a carton of fresh apple cider, and a brand new pack of colored pencils. He smiled to himself, realizing that he had not planned the morning around work for the first time in many years. Emma was already waiting outside with Miss Evelyn when his car pulled into the parking lot. The moment she recognized the familiar black sedan, her face lit up with the same bright smile Nathan remembered from the photo booth. She hurried toward him, but stopped just before reaching the car, as though she wanted to make sure this was truly happening again. Nathan stepped out carrying the bakery bag. Good morning, he said warmly. Emma laughed happily. You came back. Nathan nodded without hesitation. I said I would. Miss Evelyn smiled quietly from the front steps. Some promises become much more important after they are spoken. Emma carefully removed the little notebook from her backpack. The folded $10 bill still rested safely between the completed checklist and the first memory page exactly where she had placed it the week before. She opened to the next blank page and looked at Nathan. Do we get another chapter? Nathan accepted one of the colored pencils and gently wrote across the top of the clean page. Chapter 2. Emma added today's date underneath before drawing a tiny smiling sun in the corner. They spent the morning walking through a nearby farmer's market where Emma carefully chose a small pumpkin because, as she explained, every fall memory should have something orange. They sampled warm apple slices sprinkled with cinnamon, listened to a local guitarist playing familiar songs, and watched children painting autumn leaves at a community art table. Nathan noticed something different about Emma. She no longer looked around searching for what other families had. Instead, she smiled because she was fully present inside her own moment. While they rested beneath a large maple tree, Emma quietly removed her father's letter and read one sentence again. Then she folded it carefully and placed it back inside the notebook beside the napkin heart and the family photograph. Nathan watched the familiar keepsakes slowly becoming a collection of hope instead of reminders of loss. What did your father write? He asked gently. Emma smiled. He said that people who choose to stay often become the family our hearts recognize first. Nathan looked away for a moment, feeling those words settle deeply inside him. Before either of them spoke again, Emma reached into her backpack one more time and removed a folded program from her elementary school. She hesitated before handing it to Nathan. Across the front were the words, Autumn Music Celebration. One sentence had been circled carefully in blue pencil. Student solo performance. Emma looked at him with quiet hope. My concert is 3 weeks from today, she whispered. The last blank page in my notebook says that I want someone waiting for me after I finish singing. Nathan held the program gently as the autumn wind turned one corner of the paper. He realized the notebook had never been about spending one perfect afternoon. It had quietly become a map leading both of them toward moments that still had not happened, and for the first time he understood that the next promise he made might last far longer than a single day. 3 weeks passed more quickly than either of them expected. On the evening of the autumn music celebration, Nathan arrived at Emma's elementary school long before the auditorium doors opened. He carried no business briefcase, answered no phone calls, and ignored every notification that appeared on his screen. Instead, he quietly found a seat near the front row exactly where Emma could see him if she looked into the audience. Families gradually filled the room. Children whispered excitedly behind the stage curtains, and teachers welcomed proud parents with warm smiles. Nathan realized that for the first time in years, he was exactly where he wanted to be. When the curtain finally opened, Emma stepped onto the stage wearing a simple white dress with the same bright blue ribbon in her blonde hair. For a brief moment, she searched the audience. The instant her eyes found Nathan, her shoulders relaxed and a confident smile appeared across her face. She sang with quiet sincerity, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because she finally knew someone had kept a promise. As the final note faded, the room filled with applause. Nathan stood first. His hands came together before anyone else's, just as Emma had once written in her notebook. She smiled through grateful tears, knowing the final wish had come true. After the performance, she hurried into the hallway where Nathan was waiting with a small bouquet of autumn flowers. Without saying a word, she wrapped her arms around him. You came, she whispered. Nathan smiled gently. I told you I would. Emma opened her notebook one last time. Beneath the final wish, she carefully wrote, Someone waited for me. Then she removed the worn $10 bill that had once represented everything she owned. She placed it inside a small glass frame that Nathan had quietly brought with him. Together they added a handwritten note beneath it. The greatest gifts are never purchased. They are given through time, kindness, and keeping your promises. Months later, that framed $10 bill rested on a bookshelf inside Nathan's office, not as a reminder of wealth, but as a reminder of the afternoon that changed his life. Clients often asked why such an ordinary bill occupied the place where valuable awards usually stood. Nathan always smiled before answering, because it reminds me what success is really worth. Emma's notebook continued to grow, no longer filled with wishes waiting to happen, but with photographs, stories, ticket stubs, pressed autumn leaves, birthday cards, and ordinary Saturdays that became extraordinary simply because they were shared. Her father, continuing his rehabilitation, smiled when he saw each new page, grateful that someone had honored the spirit of every perfect dad day they had once imagined together. Looking back, Nathan often realized that Emma had never truly asked him to become her father for one day. She had simply asked whether someone would choose to stay. In the end, the little girl who believed $10 might buy a single afternoon discovered something far more valuable, and the lonely businessman who thought he was giving away his time learned that the richest moments of his life were the ones that could never be measured in dollars at all.